Before Mike starts, let me just say welcome. I'm Julie Penrod Glenn. I'm the one that conspired to have this meeting, and conspire is the right word. We had some problems with the town, but we overcame that. I'd encourage you to get something to drink before Mike starts talking, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, and everyone who helped make this happen. Thank you for coming out on Saturday afternoon to learn about this event that, one way or another, is going to have a big effect on you. I want to start by saying, as always, we have invited Plum Creek to be here. We always invite them to come to all of our events. We'd like to have a representative from Plum Creek so that we can engage them directly on these issues. They declined to appear with us. I don't think they want to acknowledge our existence. So we'll go on making these appearances as frequently as we can. We have a standing offer to Plum Creek and to anyone who disagrees with us to let us know if there's anything that's ever factually incorrect on our website and our publications. Let us know. We exist to provide an alternative point of view and another information source other than Plum Creek, who's had complete control of this message for 3 years with no other voice. So that's why we're here. We're an information clearinghouse. I am one of your 5 county commissioners. I live here in town, just south of town. I'm going to start today. I always wonder how to start. I'm going to talk for half an hour or so and then open it up to questions and answers. I know you have a lot of questions. I'm going to start by saying where this begins is that the Panama Canal is too small. Plum Creek, part of their Envision Alachua process is why here, why now? So I'm going to go big and start with that statement. Some of you may be aware that the Panama Canal is in the process of being widened. Currently, only certain size tankers, and believe me, I'm going to bring this back to Plum Creek, certain size tankers, the big ones now that are common particularly from Asia, Southeast Asia, China, can't get through the Panama Canal. They stop on the west coast. And all the stuff pouring into America that we buy at Walmart gets put on trucks and trains and sent all over the country. So the Panama Canal is a part of a process now that is being widened, the Panamax expansion, to allow these huge super tankers to now come through. And it's supposed to be completed within the next year or so and open for business. And when that happens, those big mega super tankers don't have to stop on the west coast. If they come into the eastern part of the country, they'll come right up the eastern seaboard. Now all the coastal cities, the ones with ports, the politicians, the big capital players, they've all known about this for years and they're getting ready. When this happens, Jacksonville's expanding its port, and that's the main one of interest to us. But all up and down the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic seaboard, these port cities have been deepening, widening, getting ready. So when these big super tankers start coming directly to the East Coast, all their stuff's got to be taken off and transported. So they're expanding rail networks, they're expanding road networks, and Jacksonville is one of the major centers. So what's going on right now is that they're expanding and planning to radically upgrade the amount of distribution coming out of Jacksonville. So the landowners, property owners, land speculators, you know what land speculators do. They anticipate growth. They buy land in the path of it, and they typically make a lot of money if they guess right. So US 301 is, of course, a major rail corridor, CSX. It's also a major highway. The intersection at Hawthorne, of course, also intersects with an east-west and Hawthorne Road, State Road 20, State Road 20. So Plum Creek is getting ready, and they're doing the same thing on I-10 coming west out of Jacksonville, and on I-95 going up and down. So the big players are trying to anticipate where it's going to come from and where the new manufacturers who want to take advantage of all this expanded distribution capacity want to locate their facilities. So the big picture is that's why now, and that's why here, Plum Creek is primarily, they're a timber company. You know, they grow timber. They're the largest landowner in Alachua County. They're the largest landowner in the state of Florida, and they're the largest landowner in the United States. These guys are big, and they have properties in these other roads as well that they're trying to get ready like this. What they're trying to do is get their land use and their rights upgraded, not because they're going to do anything with it. They don't build, they don't develop. but they do sell off some of their higher value properties. I think roughly 10% of their holdings are being considered now for possible sale, primarily they groceries. But that's what's prompting this. So that's how we get from the Panama Canal to here. They are a real estate investment trust, a REIT. It's a special kind of tax advantage corporation that is set up for people who want to invest in land. And I'm going to show you some maps now. Spend a little time talking about this. I'm a map guy. I think if you really want to understand what's happening with Plum Creek and why there's so much controversy surrounding what they're proposing to do, you really need to understand this land. I know a lot of you do because you live here. This is a map of Alachua County. And this data comes from the Water Management District. It's the same data that Plum Creek is using in their application to the county as required by law. And what's mapped on here is, this color here is municipalities and cities and population, and the blue are the wetlands. So the first thing that really jumps out at you as you look at this map, this part of the county is high and dry. It's where 90% of the population is. Where the agriculture, the growth, everything has always been out here. It's where people are living. This part, where we are, I'm happy to say, is extremely wet. And what you're looking at is wetlands and wetland floodplains. And this little color up here that you see a lot of is a FEMA 100-year floodplain. So essentially, these are areas that are either very difficult or impossible to develop unless something radical changes. So we're down here. Here's Hawthorne. This is the area where Plum Creek wants to do its thing. Oh, just quickly explain why it's wet. You know, this whole area, this part of the county is underlain by a layer of clay called the Hawthorne Formation. Some of you may have heard of it. You go down a certain depth, you're going to have a varying layer of clay, so that when water falls on this part of the county, it's got nowhere to go. It doesn't sink in. It cools up. And it runs off in a few places, but for the most part, it just kind of sits out there. I mean, if you were to get up in a plane and fly over this part of the county, right now, in different parts of the year when it's wet, you just constantly be looking down at the sun glistening back at you as you fly over. This much water. It stands there until the dry season. So it's really, really wet. Wetlands, wet flatwoods, a lot of these areas that aren't even mapped as wetlands are in fact wet at a certain time of the year. They just don't go far enough to be able to categorize as wetlands. It's a very, very wet area, and there are good reasons for that. All right. You can see that? I'm zooming in a little bit here, orient you. Here's Union Lake, Gainesville, and we're down here. Yeah, we're here. So basically, we're looking at the eastern half or so of the county. I'm zooming in a little bit. What you're looking at here is the same map, but with Plum Creek's lands on there now. See the dark? That's Plum Creek, and the wetlands are superimposed over them. That piece over here that's now in the city of Gainesville are doing a development there. It's not really part of what we're currently considering. This is a section of theirs. This is where they actually want to do their growth and development right now. A lot of pieces down here, some down here. You can see how wet their land is. Again, they bought timberland. They bought 60,000, 65,000, 60,000 is in play right now. 60,000 acres of wet timberland. There's no homes out there. There's nothing there. It's flat. People who've been here for a long, long time will tell you productive use of this land really is growing pine trees. Maybe on the higher areas, you know, yeah. That's what Plum Creek does. What they're proposing to do, by the way, before all this started, how many of you had heard of Plum Creek? How many of you, before all this started, had heard of the Alachua County Comprehensive Plan? Okay, good. An informed crowd. The comprehensive plan is basically a blueprint for growth and development in the county. Through the elected officials in the county commission, we adopt a kind of map that kind of steers growth to appropriate areas that aren't too environmentally sensitive or that have the infrastructure, schools, and roads necessary to support the growth. That's the comp plan. The comp plan designates all of this land. Every single acre of Plum Creek's land is designated rural agricultural, rural ag. There's a reason for that. You know, it's wet, it's farmland. They're going to keep coming back to that. The county, the comprehensive plan didn't create this reality. It does acknowledge this reality by saying this is not the right place to build a city. This is rural agriculture. Now they have rights. They have development rights. The comprehensive plan gives people in rural ag areas or land with rural ag designation the right to build one house for every 5 acres. One house for every 5 acres. If you've got 100 acres, theoretically, you could become a developer and put 20 homes on that land. They have no commercial rights whatsoever at this point. What they are asking for, and by the way, what that totals out to, they have the right to build about 7,400 homes on their entire 60,000 acres. Which, if you do the math on 60,000 acres, it should be more. The reason it's not is about almost 40% of their land already has the development rights sold. The previous owner, Georgia Pacific, some of you may remember, used to own most of this land. Sold it to Plum Creek 10, 15 years ago. But all this land south of Hawthorne Road down here can never be developed. All the rights have been sold. So 40% of the land can be developed. Look at the rest, what they have, about 7,400 homes is what they can build. They're asking the county commission to do several things. These are the most important things. They want to build more. They want 10,500 homes. More importantly, they want 15.5 million square feet of commercial. Now, to put that in perspective, the Oaks Mall in Gainesville is about 1 million square feet. So the equivalent size is about 15 Oaks Malls. And by the way, we've been accused by Plum Creek of claiming that they want to build 15 Oaks Malls. No, that's just to give you a sense of the area that we're talking about. About 15. No, that's just the structure building. Does not include all the stuff that goes around. Square feet, 15 million square feet of commercial. And they want to do all of that in this area. As you can see, it's really wet, but of their holdings, it's got the most dry on it. If you were going to do something like that, it's got to happen. And so they want the 15 million square feet of commercial and the 7,400 homes in this area. I haven't specified where yet, because we're not that part of this process. And they're offering in exchange to basically extinguish the rights on this piece up here and this piece down here. They want to transfer those rights to here and then put this land into permanent conservation easement. I'll talk to you in a minute about what that means. I want you to take note before I move on. This area in particular, it's all blue. There's almost nothing there. So they're giving up the right to develop land that they cannot develop. They're making the best of a bad situation, and they're doing the same thing down here. It doesn't matter whether we have a comprehensive plan or not. Just there are financial, real obstacles to developing land like this. And if any of you are familiar with this area, it's up near Waldo. It's called the Northeast Flatwoods. It's, well, like that. So that's what they're proposing. Now, some of us have known this is coming for years, you know, because they've been making sounds about doing something with their land for a while. Again, getting ready for this commercial expansion they think is coming up and down the rail and road corridor. So a group of us got together 6 months ago. We're just concerned about this, and we've been listening to Plum Creek again for 3 years, creating this mythology about what they're doing. And the newspaper and the media just passed it right along with no skepticism, with no critical analysis of what they're proposing. They've created their story about what they're planning to do. And, you know, if I want to sell you shampoo, that's the way I like to say this, I'm not going to talk to you about how the soap molecules bind with dirt and grease and wash out your hair and leave it without the dirt and grease. I'm going to talk about sex, fast cars, and how attractive you're going to be to the opposite sex if you buy my shampoo. Plum Creek has set up this process wherein they empowered a task force, a group of citizens, and asked them, what do you want for the community? What are your hopes and dreams? Tell us what you want to have happen. And of course, every community in America is going to say the same things. We want good jobs. We want blue-collar jobs in particular that pay well. But we want to protect the environment. We want a place to take our kids and recreate. We want growth and development and all the good things that come with it without any of the bad things. So basically, that's what this task force said. They didn't get very specific about that. Plum Creek, and this is their stated policy. I've read where they boast to their shareholders about this. Their policy is to, once you've done that process, turn it around and tell the community, this is what you want, and so we're going to do it. We're going to give it to you. They're land speculators. That's what they do. They don't build warehouses. They don't create jobs. They don't build anything. They grow trees, and on some of their land, they try to get it upzoned and upzoned so that it's more valuable, and they flip it around. So it's easy to promise all these things, and they've said a lot of things during this process that I want to debunk quickly, and that's why we formed this group, because they're lying, basically. They were saying things that are not true, and creating a frame of reference on this that really wasn't honest or accurate. And the biggest fib they've been creating and saying to people is that there's no plan for any of this. They've got 60,000 acres. They want to build something. Unless we have their plan and their vision, there will be random chaotic growth across the countryside. Because theoretically, they can build 7,400 homes, so 5-acre ranchettes spread across the landscape. Bad for the environment, bad for planning. There is no plan. There is a plan. There's a good plan. The Alachua County Comprehensive Plan. It's not perfect. It's controversial. It's the result of many, many years and thousands of meetings and lawsuits, all kind of funneling from the community up through the county commission. It can be changed through a vote of the county commission, but it's the best thing that we have for a collective vision of the community. It's the closest we're ever going to get to the county's comprehensive plan. There's many things I don't like about it, and there are many things people on the other side of the political spectrum don't like about it, but it's pretty close to a consensus. It allows growth and development. There are no limits, really, while protecting natural resources and making sure the development goes to places where the public can afford to provide infrastructure, roads, schools, parks, etc. So we have an excellent plan. It was a false choice from the beginning. I'm going to say a few specific things about the comp plan and why we think it's better. But the biggest thing is, and this is why we got started, we're not against Plum Creek. We welcome them as neighbors. They're going to be here a long, long time. They're big property owners. We just want them to abide by the same rules that every other developer, every other landowner in the county has to abide by. Follow the comprehensive plan and then exercise your rights. And the day may come many, many years in the future when we're so crowded and so built out. Everything out here on the west with higher, drier land is built out where it may become perfect. Start thinking about things that we want to do here, but we're not there yet. We're not even close. So I forgot to mention one other thing that Plum Creek wants to do. In order to develop here, they're going to have to drain some wetlands, obviously. I mean, old school dredge and drain Florida development. So they've asked that the county's wetland protections, which are stronger than the state and federal guidelines, to be set aside in favor of the state and federal guidelines. What that means is that the state process, there's two differences between that and the county. One, any wetland under ½ an acre, according to the state process, just doesn't exist. You can bulldoze and fill it in. It doesn't exist. Anything over ½ an acre, you can also bulldoze and fill in, but you have to dig essentially an equivalent size hole somewhere else to hold the same amount of water. Now, those of you who are familiar with my education's in zoology, I spent a lot of time in the woods. Those of you who get out and hike a lot, you know how important those small, isolated wetlands are. The biology of them, the critters that live there, the plants, but also they hold the stormwater, they hold the floods, the hurricanes, the monsoons. It's like a giant sponge that holds the water in place, reduces flooding, and then slowly releases it in an appropriate way. So those small wetlands, which there are hundreds of thousands probably, are very important in their own right. So what Plum Creek wants to do, we don't really know yet the specifics about which wetlands are going to be destroyed or where, because unfortunately, the way this process works, the details will come at a later stage of the approval process. There's 2 stages to it. The first is called legislative, where they're asking us to change the comprehensive plan. And it's broad in general. They designated blobs where they want to build and develop, but nothing specific. So we keep asking them for more information, and they keep telling us, well, we can't, and they're right, because that comes later. The problem is, once the county commission approves those land use changes, there's no going back. You can't say, okay, now we've seen the details, we've seen the specifics, too much, we don't want to do that. Once you change the comp plan, you've given them rights, you've vested them with rights, and they can't go back. So it's kind of like a blank check when you can't subtract. So, big picture standby plan, we think the comprehensive plan gets it right. It's more comprehensive. Plum Creek's process they've set up, basically set up this task force, and met with the community and asked them, what's the best way to build the city here? That's the question they've essentially asked. We want to be environmentally conscientious, we want to be responsible, we want to follow good planning, so what's the best way to build the city here? The comp plan asks the more appropriate and broader question. Where do we want to build a city? That's the question, in my opinion, any of our group, you ask first. Where is it appropriate to have this kind of growth and development and impacts? And viewed from the context of the entire county, if I were to put this map back up there, this is the last place you would build a new city. Last place. Doesn't make any sense from a broad community planning perspective. So we support the comprehensive plan, and we ask Plum Creek to do the same thing. I want to mention one thing too. I think everyone needs to understand that if we were to approve this, there's lots of little inholdings all over this area of people who have land. They're not Plum Creek. They're going to want the same rights. They're going to ask for those rights. There's going to be a lot of piggyback growth and development. So once Plum Creek gets going, and the value of the surrounding parcels begins to rise if you're on the major road corridors, they're all going to approach the county commission in the future, ask for the same consideration. I don't know on what basis we would say no. So there's going to be a lot of unplanned, unregulated piggyback growth and development so that you basically get classic strip commercial development in areas eventually. 50-year plan, that's what they're proposing. So we need to think about piggyback growth as well. I'll say one more thing about this before I move on to some of the things we think are myths. This little piece right here, around Hawthorne, this is Hawthorne. There's a piece here, which standby plan does not oppose. We think that this makes sense. This is the area, it's immediately adjacent to Hawthorne. It's in their annexation reserve. We think it ought to develop the way Plum Creek's asking, and it ought to be annexed into the city. There's no strategic ecosystem, which I haven't explained yet. I'll do that in a second. This is the area where Plum Creek is promising to create the jobs. This is their manufacturing area where they're going to have the hopefully large-scale kind of development, economic development that's not available elsewhere in the county. I think it's right here on 301. Remember we were talking about the rail line, the road corridor. This part of it here, about 1,200 acres, we support that. We think it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's adjacent to an existing city, adjacent to an existing commercial center. Most of the economic goodies they're promising are there. They also want to do some commercial there mixed in with it. We think the right approach might be go ahead and approve this, give them 10 years to grow and develop, and see what happens. See how they do what they do. It's the rest of this. Out here in the wet flat woods, it's not the place for the rest of what they're doing, which is primarily residential, mixed with kind of boutique commercial, a hill plantation kind of model, where they have a little commercial center. There's no shortage of this. There's enough approved residential capacity in the unincorporated part alone of Alachua County, west of town, to support about 50 years worth of growth. Already approved. There's no demand that is not being met. They would be in competition with everyone else. They'd be in competition with the city of Gainesville, good things that are going on there, the downtown development. That's the kind of growth they want to do. Mixed use, walkable type development, that's their market niche. And it's going on up and down the I-75 corridor, a lot of things there that have been approved in recent years that allow for a lot of commercial capacity. They'd be in direct competition, not providing something at this point. Okay, some of the things they're saying. 5-acre ranchettes. That if we don't give them what they want, they're going to build one home on every 5 acres over all this land. Okay, that can't happen. It's a bluff. It's a false threat for a number of reasons. First of all, the comp doesn't allow that. If you're going to do a development, you have to cluster it, which means that if you've got 100 acres and you've got and you're doing a development, not an individual homestead. If you have 5 acres, you can build a house on it. But if you're a developer, and you've got 100 acres, 20 homes. You have to put those 20 homes on half the land and set aside the most environmentally sensitive half. Now, the people who live there own that, so there's their park, basically, but it protects those those natural areas. It's got to be clustered. You still can't destroy the wetlands. Nothing's going to happen up here. All these areas that are wet in 100-year floodplain, you can't impact those, you can't destroy those. So the reality is, if they were to build according to their current rights, if there was demand for it, which there isn't, the 5-acre ranchette market is just dead in the water. Everyone knows that the future is this smaller, more compact, walkable type places that are popping up all over the country right now. But if they wanted to do that, they couldn't because of the wetland constraints and because of the comprehensive plan. So if they did build those 7,400 homes, it would be in a way that would still be far less damaging to the environment than what they're asking for, which is another 3,000 homes, and all of that commercial. So we're not worried about the 5-acre ranchette threat. We think it's really just a kind of something they're throwing up there to maybe get some environmentalists to come along to their side. They made a promise, which has raised a lot of eyebrows, including some from the environmental community, to set aside 87% of their land. They're going to conserve 87% of their land if we give them what they want. And I'll just start by saying that's what they have to set aside anyway. And I'll explain why. If we were developing them the comprehensive plan, that's the same number. They're not giving up anything. It's not like the shareholders of Plum Creek are just really generous people. 40% already protected. They always manage to forget to tell people that. 40% of it's already protected. We don't own the rights.
We bought those.
That's right.
Is
Thanks
that
for
what
pointing that
tax-
out. Yes, the development rights, Georgia Pacific sold them to the state at fair market value. It was a voluntary transaction. They bought the development rights. You continue to grow timber here, do things in agriculture, but you can't build. And they knew that when they bought the land. That's why they were able to buy it so cheap. So 40% is already extinguished. Of what remains, so much of it is wet. Half of it is undevelopable wetland. Again, not just because the comprehensive plan protects it, because it is so wet. I mean, you can dredge and drain, you can still do some things profitably here. You're not going to do that up here. It's all wet. Nothing to protect. So, and then also the strategic ecosystem protection. I did not mention, I'll quickly do that now. There are some parts of Alachua County, and it's in our comprehensive plan, that have particular environmental significance. They're just really important on a regional wildlife scape, or they have huge stormwater significance for the rest of the county. And the county designates these areas as strategic ecosystems. Okay. This map is similar to that one. It shows Plum Creek's holdings here. This is the area where they want to build and develop. As you can see, this cross-hatching is the strategic ecosystem. Strategic ecosystem. It's almost all strategic ecosystem, except for this little piece near Hawthorne. Again, another reason why we don't oppose that part. So what this means is, if your land owns strategic ecosystem, you have to preserve half of it, whether you cluster or not. I mentioned the clustering provision. If you're doing commercial development, any kind of development, you have to protect the most environmentally sensitive half of the land. Okay, thank you, Scott. So the upshot of all of this is they're not giving away anything. That 87% is something they would have to do anyway. And it's also important to point out that when they say conservation, most of us, when we hear that, we think of woods where you can go and walk with your kids, and it's a recreational opportunity, you do some bird watching, that kind of thing. They're tree farmers. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they're tree farmers. You just need to understand that what they do is industrial agriculture. They clear cut the land. They deep till it. They plant rows of pine trees that have often been selected for certain characteristics. They use chemicals, they use herbicides to control vegetation. They don't burn the way the more conscientious growers do. And I'm not saying this to say that this is all bad. I'm just pointing out that that's what they do. It's not conservation. Okay? They do relatively short rotation industrial silviculture. So if they're spending 87% in conservation, the question then becomes, well, how does the environment benefit? And we just want to make sure people understand that what they're doing is more akin to agriculture than to public conservation land. You're not going to be allowed to go out there and hike in the woods. And just about done here. Jobs for East Gainesville.
Sure.
This is another one of those shampoo promises, where what do you want? We want more growth development jobs in East Gainesville, an economically impoverished area, which is true. We're working on that problem. That's over here. Okay. This is where they want to create the jobs. It's 15 miles away. Town of Tioga, Jonesville, you know where that is? It's about the same distance. It's a little closer, actually, where these jobs are going to happen. I-75 in that corridor is 5 to 7 miles away from East Gainesville. So how, and we repeatedly asked them, explain the sequence of events that's going to lead to this helping East Gainesville. If all of the growth and development that's going on out here and would otherwise go on out here, concrete didn't get what it wants, because again, they're going to be competing with them. If all of this is not providing jobs for this area, how is this going to? It seems like a logical question. We can't get an answer to that. So I really don't want to say anything more other than that we think the burden of proof is on Plum Creek to show how that's going to happen. It's not up to us to show how it's not going to happen. Okay, I'm going to close this way. Well, first let me say this. The approval process, the way this is going to work. It's a complicated process. They've formally submitted their application now. Staff is looking at it. It's going to come to the county commission and the planning commission, which is a citizen body appointed by the county commission, will make recommendations. It comes to the planning commission first, and the county commission for hearings, a series of public hearings. This will probably happen late fall, winter, maybe. And then the county has to transmit the entire thing to the state for review, because the state wants a crack at it. They want to make sure their facilities and what all are not affected. It takes a couple of months, then it comes back to the county commission. We'll have more public hearings. So the decision points are happening next year. So the county commission will decide. Your elected representatives are going to choose. If you're concerned about this one way or another, you need to understand that your county commission is going to make the decision. And there are candidates. There are 2 races this fall, and there are candidates for both of those positions. Some of them are more aligned with our group and support our position. Some of them are more aligned with Plum Creek. And I'm not going to get into names and things. It's not my job. It's your job as a citizen to understand who those people are and to make sure that you know that there is a difference. You have options. The election is going to kind of be a mandate on this, the way we're looking at it. Because again, the county commission will decide. And that will, again, the decision will be next year. I'm going to close with this.
Mike, a quick question. When that decision takes place, it will only require a 3-2 vote, not a supermajority or anything like that. It simply
Correct.
will require a majority of the commission.
Majority vote. We can reject it, approve it with conditions, or we can approve it as requested. And Plum Creek, if they're not happy with the way things are going, they can withdraw their application. Which, depending upon how the elections go, may be exactly what they do.
Wow.
Usually we have a projector where we kind of put all this up on the wall so it's easier to see. I'm sorry we couldn't do that here today. So I'm going to just read this to you. This is an interview that the CEO of Plum Creek, his name is Rick Holly, gave to some investors and business press a few months ago in April. Speaking to stock analysts, where he described what their plan is. You know, the local folks, they like to say they're nice people, people that are working here locally, but they're not the ones who are going to make task force, they're well-meaning people, but they're not going to make the decisions. The corporation is going to make the decisions on what happens here. And everyone is very curious as to what is Plum Creek's plan? What's their long-term plan? What are they going to do? Are they going to develop this? What's going to happen? Here's where Rick Holly talks about what they're going to do in Alachua County. I'll read you a quote, and there's also a piece in here, and I'll be happy to, there's a link to this on our website where you can go read the story yourself.
We have a bunch of them right here.
Thanks. Here's what he said. One of the key initiatives for the company over the past several years has been the entitlement of our most valuable development properties. Holly told analysts on April 28th. Through the pursuit of these entitlements, we change the very nature of these assets and create long-term value for shareholders. By entitlements, he means zoning and development rights. We do not intend to pursue vertical development, jargon for building. We do not intend to pursue vertical development or invest a significant amount of capital into these properties. Rather, our strategy is to spend time and effort to move these properties up the value chain through entitlement and capture that value. Now, what that means is they're trying to get the zoning changed from the county commission so they have a more valuable piece of land that can compete with everyone else, and they're going to sell it, which is fine. That's what they do. That's part of what they do, but that's what they should be telling people. They're not going to be the master developer. Anything that gets approved by the county commission eventually in terms of specific developments, they will not be doing it. They will sell pieces of this land to private developers who will do what they're going to do. And each and every one of them is going to have their own plans, their own ambitions, what they want to do. And each and every one of them has the right to come back to the county commission at any time in the future and ask for changes. And it only takes a 3-2 vote. So the part that they're proposing to develop, the homes, the commercial, all of this area, the development parts of it, do not assume that anything that is a part of their proposal is what will actually happen there. We do not know what will happen. Anything can happen, the market will dictate. That's the important point, so I wanted to close with that. Thank you, I've been going on for a long time, you've been very patient, and I appreciate your attention. I'll be happy to answer questions as long as anybody wants to ask.
Mike, one reason I think many of us are here is to have you look at the question of what's the potential impact for Micanopy? Because Plum Creek doesn't own any property around here, not too close, just right up the road on 234. But we believe that sprawl effect could really affect Micanopy. So can you talk to that?
Very much so. I mean, what they're proposing to do basically is recreate on the east what's happening in the west. Want to build cities, neighborhoods, blah, 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 improve all this. I talked about the piggyback effect. Existing population centers will definitely be impacted by this. Some people may want to live in Micanopy or Hawthorne or Waldo or Melrose. These people who are living out there, they're getting in their car, they're going to drive to their job at UF or wherever, they're going to go right through East Gainesville on their way to their job. There will be spillover growth and development, no doubt about it. Can't anticipate what's going to happen, how it's going to look, but it'll affect us. They're not proposing to build any new roads, for instance. 30,000 more people is what they want to put in there roughly. 30,000 new cars, no new roads. So that's about as specific as an answer.
So the development that would happen, theoretically, the taxpayers would be shouldering the burden for all the capital and the infrastructure development, as I understand it. Is that
No,
basically right?
that's a complicated question. For the most part, at least in Alachua County, we have fees that require developers to pay their share of impacts up front to build. Now, once they do that, they turn it over to the county. It's now the public's to maintain. So the developer should have to shoulder most of their impacts, things that actually have to be built. Again, not Plum Creek. It'll be the developers that they sell to who will individually go through this process of determining what their impact on the public infrastructure is. Write you a check. Now we can develop. Now it's yours. So yes and no. The county has to take care of it once it's built.
This is a question
When it goes through the county commission and you approve or unapprove whatever happens to all of the list of things that they do, and you send it to the state of Tallahassee, does Tallahassee have the power at this point in time, because I know the Koch brothers have been, after several of the state capitals in the states that they are already in, to take the power out of the consent from the local community and put it into the state community. So my question is, at the state level, does the state have then the power to say, no, we're not going to do this, or yes, we're going to do this for Plum Creek?
Under the current process, okay, Tallahassee and the governor's office right now could not care less about growth. They just want more of it. There is no planning really at the state level anymore. Those agencies have been dismantled, incorporated into other bodies, so it's really more of a wave through. Formality. It will go to the state, they'll look at it, make sure that, maybe they have a roadway that might be impacted, they want to make sure that there's going to be enough capacity on the road, then it comes back. So not in that part of the process.
Okay.
Now, that's under current law.
Right.
Plum Creek, they hire a lot of people. They put a lot of people on the payroll in Alachua County. So these letters you're reading in the newspaper, these columns, they're coming from people who are on payroll. They have lobbyists in Tallahassee. So the concern has been and continues to be, if the county commission ultimately says no, will they do an in-run and go to Tallahassee and basically just get some kind of law written for them that allows them to do what they want to do? And the answer is yes, that could happen. Now again, what they would be doing is setting aside the comprehensive plan for their own set of rules and regulations. So worst case scenario, if that were to eventually happen and they were just very brazenly set aside one of the most fundamental rights that counties and cities still have. We still have the right to control land use. It's not a small thing. So I'm skeptical that's something they could accomplish, certainly in the short term, because that would create such an uproar. Again, we don't get to do much at the local level anymore. We can still do that. We get to determine our own outcome of our own communities through our locally elected officials. So it would be hard for them to do that. Worst case scenario, they're back to doing what they want to do. So you haven't lost anything. They might do it.
Does the proposed area include Windsor, or is it to the east of Windsor and Ward 301?
Windsor is right here.
I don't want
It's surrounded, a big crescent. Now, they have proposed, and again, it's all tentative at this point, but they have proposed to surround Windsor with a band of areas that they will not, they're going to continue to practice forestry, but they're not going to build homes. All the rest of this is variegated. There's one big blob they want to do here,
Mike.
blob they want to do right up here.
I'm so sorry, but Mother Nature was a little loud right there. I didn't catch that.
How far back do I need to go?
Just a couple sentences,
Okay,
please.
there's a little band right around the focal point of the community right here. As you all know, Windsor is all down these three roads. But this little area right here, that they proposed to put a little crescent of land that would just remain in forestry. Build a home on it. The rest of it's fair game.
Sorry, I was right.
Okay, right down here.
Doug, I had a couple of questions, but since you were talking about Windsor, I was wondering if you would point out to people the other rural clusters that are surrounded and going to be engulfed.
Sure. Let's see, we're on 24. Here, 4. Okay, here's Rochelle. Windsor, Orange Heights, Melrose is right here somewhere. Campbell, Micanopy, Evanston's kind of south of it. Those are rural clusters.
Localoosa's down there, right?
Yeah. Localoosa's down here.
Yeah.
But everything south of State Road 20 is already conservation land, it can't be changed.
Not this piece here. This is US 301.
So anything to the
East, east of US 301. But as you can see, this is one of those extremely wet areas, like this area up here. There's not really a credible threat of development. There's a little piece right here that straddles Bolton Park Road. I don't know where that is, coming out of Hawthorne. It looks a little higher and drier, they might be able to do a small development there. But for the most part, no, there's not a lot of growth development. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a very good presentation, but one thing I haven't heard you talk about, which has come up in like say another place, are intermodal cargo ports. And there are applications for federal earmarks for a new CSX rail spur into Jacksonville, which would connect with their 301 spur. And the CSX line needs to get a special exemption from the federal government to increase their capacity through the Osceola National Forest. And that CSX line runs right through Hawthorne. So where I'm going with the question is, in many states, companies, when they have a major impact upon the transportation infrastructure, have to pay for transportation structures. And what is the impact if they put a big intermodal cargo port near 301 in Hawthorne upon the local roads? And is Plum Creek being asked at this point to fund any transportation analysis studies such as Walmart and other developers have been required to do in Alachua County?
They will, at the point at which they move forward to the next stage of the approval process, have to do transportation analysis. There is a local county-adopted multimodal transportation mitigation fee, which they would have to contribute to cover their impacts, their car impacts, not their rail impacts, if that's what you're asking about.
Well, I'm thinking about the truck impact if you build an intermodal.
Same as car,
facility.
they include that in their analysis, it counts as a car trip. So the impacts to the roads, up to a point, they would have to pay a one-time fee that theoretically covers their share of future expansions. And then they're out, then it's the taxpayer's responsibility to maintain. Does that answer your question?
No, that was good. I just was curious why you hadn't mentioned the industrial impact.
I thought I did, explain how they're coming out of Jacksonville, what's driving this is the expansion of the rail and road
Right,
networks.
but you hadn't focused in necessarily on, I'm not being critical, I mean, the possible intermodal facility right at 301 and 20 and that.
Yeah, this area right here where they're promising to deliver all the jobs, this is what they think they have that's different from the rest of the county. This little place here where they've got like 1,200 acres, where they think that if a big manufacturer wanted to move in, an automobile assembly plant, something big that really could provide some of those great jobs, this is where they do it. Because it's right here beside the rail, right here beside US 301, a state road and a federal highway, where that getting it off the rail, getting it back on, or getting it into trucks, the intermodal aspect that you mentioned, it would happen right here. It doesn't really make any sense over here.
Because I'm beyond the Maine originally, and they're the largest landowner there. They purchased 900,000 acres in 1998, and they promised upscale vacation homes, and they haven't built one house in 16 years. And that's true, and that's verifiable.
We do not intend to pursue vertical development. That's a significant amount of capital into these properties. Rather, our strategy is spend time there, move these properties up the value chain, sell it
I
off.
just have one more question. I want to dominate, but I have one more thing I'm curious about. We ran some numbers on the wastewater capacity in Hawthorne, based on the town of Hawthorne website. They're like 78% capacity. And at one of the meetings, they promised Hawthorne thousands of new homes. It would be mathematically impossible to add 1,000 new homes without a brand new wastewater plant. So this gets back to Julie's question and others. They're really fudging this issue of no infrastructure costs. Because there's no way Hawthorne could handle the new homes without having to apply to the federal government for like $20 to $30 million new wastewater plant. And I know Lake City's fudging this now. They're building a new wastewater plant. And the town officials sound as if they're marketers for Plum Creek. There's no infrastructure cost in Lake City. The new plant is completely unrelated to the new intermodal park. So I know Plum Creek is very clever in saying no new infrastructure.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. There are a lot of aspects of this that I haven't gone into today. I haven't talked about water, for instance.
Yeah, right.
That's a whole day to discuss water quality and water quantity, wastewater. Who's going to deal with consequences of growth? It's growth. And this is an area where it's going to be harder in most areas because it's so wet and low and flat. And yeah, we don't have the answers to those kind of questions. That's all going to come later. And Hawthorne They could annex this part. By the way, the elected officials in Hawthorne won. They unanimously support it. And it may produce some good things for Hawthorne. But, you know, there are pros and cons to growth. You gotta take the bad with the good. But the good stuff, the effects are probably gonna be very localized. And the bad stuff's gonna be spread out all over. But the reason they haven't moved aggressively to annex it yet is because they don't have a multimodal transportation mitigation fee like the county does. That means that under their guidelines, Plum Creek doesn't have to pay anything. And they will be responsible for that. So they're gonna wait until it gets developed under the county's guidelines, and then they'll annex.
And aren't we also talking, if everything comes to fruition as Plum Creek has in its plan, the widening of 301 to a major highway like I-75 in order to accommodate all of this traffic that's coming out of Jacksonville? So we're going to be widening 301 and widening 26 and have all these major roads now instead of rural roads going through rural communities.
They wanna grow this area. They wanna grow the road network and the rail network. And again, this is speculative. It's not guaranteed anything's gonna happen here for the next 30 or 40 years. Landowners all over have a map of the state, a big crescent around Jacksonville. You know, they're all doing the same thing. They're jockeying for position. They're trying to get in the path of the growth. That's how land speculators can make their fortune. So they think they're well poised to compete at this particular location, but I don't think anyone thinks it's going to happen in the short term. Not even they're saying that. This is a long-term plan. Again, they're moving it up the value chain. They're going to sell it eventually to someone else when the development eventually reaches this point. There are other places that you want to build a manufacturing facility, be on a rail, be on a road network. They make a lot more sense. At least for the time being. But eventually,
Plum Creek owns land in the city, they're doing the same game.
they are. In the I-10 corridor, that they're doing a similar
Makes
thing.
sense to be in the city, actually. Then they go north, south, east, or west.
Right, so right now, they're just upgrading the value of their land by asking the county commission.
For land use changes, can you talk a little bit more specifically about the specific amendments? Apparently, Plum Creek Envision Alachua has asked for 50 to 80 specific changes to the comp plan, and I assume those those include land use changes?
92, I think, is the last time I asked staff, specific policy changes, there were like 92. Essentially, they're creating their own plan. That's the best way to think about it. They're not amending the comprehensive plan. They're right here creating their own little nation, where the rules are different. So I couldn't even begin to go into those. The big ones I mentioned are the fact that it was rural ag, now it will basically be intense development rights, wherever they want to put them. And the environmental protections. There wouldn't be strategic ecosystem protections, there wouldn't be wetland protections, would be very different, they'd be mitigating.
So basically, all that property, they divided up into, we want a land use change of commercial in this area, and we want industrial commercial in this area, and
They have
agriculture,
created
et
a
cetera.
new land use category, which they called mixed use employment center.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Mixed use
that's
employment center, which basically says anything can be done. Residential, commercial, industrial, manufacturing, anything goes. We don't know the specifics yet because we're, again, not at that stage of the process. Later, they'll begin submitting specifics, but they probably won't. The developers who eventually build here will ask for their own plan. What it basically does is it gives them maximum amount of rights to do what they want on that land. Yes, sir.
Essentially, what they're doing is building a sales brochure for the developers.
That's an appropriate statement.
Yeah.
Am I paranoid, or does the fact that the Southeast Regional representative of Plum Creek's interests is living in Gainesville and has suddenly become extremely active in the Greater Gainesville Chamber of Commerce, according to the profile in the Gainesville Sun a few weeks
They're not paranoid.
Does that say that Gainesville is in the center of their target of interest of
Oh,
in
yeah.
the Southeast United States for development and
Let me read it.
political?
This article that I read from you, it concludes with this paragraph. Plum Creek's largest development opportunity is in Alachua County, Florida, the city of Gainesville, Holly said. see, yeah. Plum Creek's the largest landowner, 60,000 acres. Plum Creek plans a mix of land uses and it's started the entitlement phase. It expects to have public hearings this summer. That didn't happen. And approval within the next 12 to 18 months. So, yeah, it's
Related question. With all this focus of attention and activity, am I imagining things, or is the Chamber and the Realtors Association and probably United Industries of Florida all lining up to support this? Or do you not have
No,
the
it's
information on that yet?
interesting. I can't speak very specifically to what you're saying, because I don't have a list of all the people who said yes to Plum Creek, no to Plum Creek. It's creating some interesting dynamics, though, because I think there are other commercial and industrial interests in this area who realize that Plum Creek will be competition for them. Blackwood, the city of Blackwood has a nice industrial park. By the way, it's about the same distance from East Gainesville as this. But they have an industrial park up there that's going very well. Designated as a large area out there, and they know that there's competition. The city of Gainesville should realize that this is competition for growth and development. You know, the good things that have been going on in downtown Gainesville the last 20 years, those of you who've been around for a long time may remember what Gainesville looked like 20 years ago. All boarded up. And a lot of good things are happening now. A lot of good things built. Because we're offering this market niche for people to live that increasingly, and particularly younger people, that's where they want to live. They don't want to live in traditional suburbia, which we still have plenty of. This is providing an alternative. And that's what Plum Creek wants to do here. You know, they're ahead of the game. They know that's the way things are going. So they'd be in direct competition. They'd be draining resources from the cities. That's what sprawl does. I haven't used that word yet. Maybe I should pull it out. Yeah, this is textbook sprawl. Jumping way out into the countryside and starting a new commercial center. And sprawl does a few things universally. It hurts surrounding municipalities. It hurts existing populations. It drains investment and resources from them. So that's what they're doing.
What does St. John's Water Management have to say about this?
Go for it.
Well,
Looks to me like they'd be quite interested in.
they are. And they're the ones who bought these development rights on this 40%. So they were sold to the state, they were sold to the water management districts. Because of course, this is all the headwaters for Orange Creek, goes into the Ocklawaha River, goes into the St. Johns River, into the Atlantic Ocean. So they're the ones who bought these rights. And at this point, they appear to have what they want. So they will be monitoring all of this. They will have some say, I'm sure, in water withdrawals. They don't seem to be saying no to anyone. But they will theoretically have a process that will approve withdrawals, requests, and subdivision permits, all of that. It will come much later in the process. And they also kind of define the information that you have to use during this approval process. I mentioned that this map was created with data from the water management districts, so that we don't have two different wetland maps. Everyone's working off the same objective map. Water management district creates all of that. So yeah, they're interested, but at least with the current political climate in Tallahassee, water management districts are not interested in slowing things down or stopping them, trying to find a way to keep things going faster.
So if these people are, if we get what we want, we get our elected officials up there and we get it turned down in whatever, a year or so from now, or 18 months, is Plum Creek going to go away, or are they just going to stand back and wait for the next commission?
Yeah, they're not going anywhere. They're quite boastful of the fact that we're going to be here. We'll wait you out, is the implied threat. It's not even implied, they're saying now. So, yeah, this is not going to go away just because we say no once. Now, a couple things can happen. Thinking in terms of in-game, I and others believe that ultimately the most important parts of this, the most environmentally important parts of it, we need to buy from them. That's the way you really make the threat go away. Not all of it would be too much money, but you can get some really large critical areas where you have the most development potential through a land referendum. There's one on the state ballot this year. Alachua County Forever has already acquired some of their land. They bought Alachua County Forever bought some of their land from Plum Creek. I don't think they're going to take it personally if we tell them no. They're a corporation. You know, they have an obligation to their shareholders. If we make them a good offer, 5, 10, 15 years from now. Presumably they take it. That's how I think we ultimately win this if we're going to win. But yes, they could, in the short term, I doubt they'd do that. They'd probably wait a few election cycles to see what happens. And again, I'm county commissioner. I don't want to inject myself too deeply into the electoral politics of it, but I will say it's your county commission that will make the decision this time. And after each election, people probably sample again and see if the mood has changed or the waters have changed. So if you feel the way I do and you think this is something that we need to put the brakes on, maybe trying to find a way to conserve some of this, we've got to win a few election cycles before Plum Creek will take it seriously. And in the meantime, the economics of the situation could change. Plum Creek, they have their ups and downs too, and their decision-making process is based upon what their shareholders are demanding. So we need to buy ourselves time.
Which in the overall picture, of what's happening now with elections in Gainesville, this group needs to be adamant that we do not want term limits or districts. Those are the two questions that are before the county right now, and is from a very vocal group of discontent people who can't get their candidates elected to the county commission. But that question's been before a comprehensive group, or rather the charter review group, and now it's before the county commission again. And we certainly don't want that to happen because it would take away your right to vote.
And that was an editorial statement and not a question, so I'm just going to leave that alone.
All you can say is yes.
Yes.
So besides electing officials that might not be in favor of Plum Creek's plan, what other maybe 2 or 3 things would you recommend individual voters or individual citizens can do to help put the brakes on this?
Well, again, that's the big one. The commissioners are the decision makers. They are your representatives in government. It's your responsibility to find out what the differences are. And if you feel the other way around, you have a choice too. I'll just say you do have choices in this election. Other than that, work through the normal process. We're getting a lot of emails. People are awake now. They're alert. There was nothing. 6 months ago, Plum Creek, for 3 years, they dominated the message completely, and control of the message is slipping away from them now, and they're unhappy about it. So email, make sure your neighbors, friends and neighbors know about this. Email or write letters to the county commission. The same old tools of democracy. Let them know what your concerns are. And you don't have to be super, super specific. It's not your job to be an analyst. Just your general concerns, communicate them to your commissioners now and after the election.
And in that, like, there's a handout here that lists all the county commissioners, current county commissioners, addresses, telephone numbers, and email addresses, as well as how to contact Missy Daniels at the Growth Management Department. I'd encourage you all to take one of these, write this down so you know how to get a hold of the county commissioners. They've been very responsive to me individually when I emailed them. And the other thing, I want to remind you all that there's an election, August 26th. And at that election, we have an opportunity to vote for 2 new county commissioners. And some of those folks are here today. I'd encourage you to find out who they are, find out what they want to do, what their position is on this. And our best chance is to get the vote to be 4-1 when it comes to vote next time. So if we can get 2 more people elected that are pro stand by our plan, we have a good chance of having it defeated next year when it comes to a vote. But we're talking about a long-term plan here, so.
And I should emphasize that stand by our plan is not partisan. We're not a PAC. We support a comprehensive plan. All the candidates have been invited to this process. Every event we have, everyone is welcome. Some come, some don't, so you can draw your own conclusions. The important vote is the primary. Thank you for pointing that out. You know, there are 2 different elections. There's the general one in November. The important decisions locally on this issue are going to be in the August 26th primary. If you're a registered Democrat, you can participate in that. If you're not, you can't.
You can change it up till July something.
I need to have a date.
I'm Ken Cornell, I'm on the county commission, and the date is August 26th.
Are you for or against Plum Creek?
I am against the plan. I am for our comprehensive plan.
Good.
And I'm having an event along with, and I'm inviting the other person who is for our comprehensive plan, Harvey Ward, who's here tonight, today, out in Hawthorne at 4:30. We're gonna feed everyone that comes. It's a fish fry, 4:30 to 7. If you'd like to learn more about me, my candidacy, and some of the issues that I see, which mirror in many ways, but maybe from a different perspective, I would invite you out. I've got a map and information over on the table, and then I will be here when we conclude to speak to you individually if you can't make it.
And I should point out in response to your question too about what can you do, all this stuff we have, yard signs, t-shirts, it is just so joyful to me to drive through the eastern part of the county now and see the roads just lined with our signs.
Can I make one other?
No, these are only private property and.
Can I make one other quick point? This really is not a partisan issue. And when I hear when I hear Plum Creek officials say, we'll just wait for the next commission, what I really hear them saying is, we don't really care what the public says, we'll just get our people elected. And they're now referring to this as noise in the system. Noise in the system. So this is noise, and it is in the system. And what I would say is, this is not partisan. This is about how we as a community want to grow as a community and protect our community. And so whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican, if everyone in the community wants a different plan for these lands, then that's what elections are for.
I have a question too. That you said that if they wait long enough, they are threatening to sell this off to development for 5.01 acre parcels. Do you think they would, if the commission votes no to this, that they would begin to do that?
There's not any demand for that kind of development right now. But even if they did, under their current rights, the worst case scenario in terms of impacting the environment is still substantially better than what they're proposing. Because we do require them to protect the wetlands. We do require them to cluster on the least environmentally sensitive half of it. So you're going to wind up with some growth, scattered neighborhoods, but done in a way that doesn't overwhelm the ecosystems of this part of the county.
Do they have land contiguous to Alachua County over Marion County, Putnam?
They have land all over the state, but this is entirely within Alachua County. I'm not aware of anything. No, that's not true. They do have land immediately east of this in Pleasant County.
So if they got turned down here, is it possible that they would just move east?
Well, again, what's driving this is this Hawthorne intermodal, the railroad network.
You didn't say that.
This is what they think. This is what they think is going to help. So, again, at least 90% of their land, they're going to continue growing trees on it for the time being. They're tree farmers. That's mainly what they do. Let me try to with people how that can't ask a question.
Let me say you said there's a committee or the volunteer citizens concerned recommend to you. What is that organization?
The Planning Commission?
Yeah.
The Planning Commission is a standing citizen advisory group appointed by the county commission, and their job is to basically preview all the land use and zoning decisions that come to the county commission. It's kind of like a first chance, and it happens the same way. The applicant or staff will make a presentation and give their recommendation. The applicant will make their presentation, and then citizens can ask questions and all those things. It's just that at the end of the process, the planning commission makes a recommendation to the county commission, and then they come to the county commission and do it all over again, and the county commission decides.
And the terms are circular. Somebody could be an opening within the next
Yes,
month.
the Citizen Advisory
So
Committee,
if you go to
anyone.
the county's website, you can find out.
Yes, you can. The county's website has lists when there are vacancies for any of our advisory committees, and anyone can apply.
Have any of y'all been to the Plum Creek meetings, their side of this?
Oh, yeah.
It couldn't be more different than this. Those folks bring in experts, high-paid consultants and public relations professionals from all over the country, and they rent the Hilton, and they rent banquet space, and they put on the most amazing show you could imagine. If you haven't been, I recommend going just to see what they do, because it's fun to spend their money. But this could not be more different. We meet in town halls and backyards to talk about what matters to the people. and they rented Hilton. That's the difference between Plum Creek and the county comprehensive plan. The county comprehensive plan is an organic process that we, the people, brought together, and it's what we need to stand by. My name is Harvey Ward. I'm with Ken. We will stand by our plan and go against Plum Creek's proposition. It's not a good thing for us. I don't feel good about what they're doing. They're turning Alachua County residents against other Alachua County residents for their own profit. And I have real problems with that. I hope that you'll talk to me afterwards, as I have a lot to say about this, but I don't want to waste everybody's time. I would love to talk to you about my candidacy, about this process and how I feel about it. But I'm going to be out at Ken's event this afternoon too, and I would love to talk with you either here or there. Thank you. I appreciate what y'all are doing.
And I want to say again, another difference between the way Stand By Our Plan is trying to handle this and the way Plum Creek is trying to handle it. We would love to have them send someone to our events and engage in dialogue with us. That's what we want. Plum Creek, I think, has been, at least, in the position of the politician who's way ahead in the polling, so he ignores his up fund. And we're catching up on them now fast, and they're aware of that. I was able to elbow my way onto a stage with them in Hawthorne a week or two ago, or a couple of weeks ago. You were there. But they were extremely uncomfortable. They are not used to having someone saying anything outside of their very tightly controlled message. And that's our job, is to make sure that they want to do these huge things to our county, even if you end up agreeing with them eventually. We ought to be talking about it, and there ought to be two sides involved, and that's why this group came into being, because before there was only one. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I don't have the same generational depth as Ed Trower's, Chitties, or Leitners, or Feasters. But I've had a chance to be in Florida and do a lot of land use work. I was chief technical consultant and chief land use consultant for 5 DRIs. And that's development of regional impacts when it was in vogue. This project, the one thing I'm really concerned about, and the thing that I focused on over the last 5 years, mainly abroad in policy making, is groundwater. And I just want to bring this book to your attention. This is Groundwater for the 21st Century by John Connors. It's a layman's version. I have 2 copies of this at the house. I've gone through one already. This is a very, very important book for an informed consumer dealing with geohydrology marketplace. And that is a prime candidate for this type of thing, okay?
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions?
I grew up in.
Right behind you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm joking.
I'll get you next.
It's short. Okay.
We live in Marion County, and I was wondering if it's beneficial at all for us to write to the Alachua County Commissioners with our opinion.
It can't hurt. Obviously, Alachua County Commissioners, we're responsible to our citizens. You will be impacted. In fact, part of the state review process is to look at the spillover impacts on the road networks, whatever, in the surrounding counties. You are an affected party. You have a right to comment on this. If you have friends or neighbors in Alachua County, obviously they can have more direct political benefit. But it certainly doesn't hurt. Because again, the county commission right now is getting a lot, because people are really just now beginning to become aware of this. And so we're starting to get a lot of emails, a lot of communications from people, and that has a cumulative impact, definitely. Because it's all one-sided pretty much at this point. Everyone's.
I met a newly purchased landowner in Micanopy. They live in Marion County, but they bought property in Gainesville, and I was telling them about, they said, what, I had a Plum Creek stuff. They said, what's Plum Creek? Is it like a peach and plum orchard? And I said, no, not hardly. So I was talking to them about it, and they didn't know anything about it. I convinced them that Plum Creek is a very bad idea. Stand By Our Plan is a good idea. They said, what can I do? We live in Marion County. I said, well, you own property here. That means you're a taxpayer in the county. So you have a right to contact all the people that are on county commission. And so my passion is talking to people. And if any of us here think that we can defeat Plum Creek by just talking to people that agree with us, we're wrong. We've got to seek out people that think Plum Creek is a fabulous idea and why they think it's a fabulous idea, and then talk to them reasonably, rationally, give them some information, and hope we can swing them. But if we just talk to ourselves, we're gonna be defeated. We're not gonna get the commission's support on this. So we have to talk to people, spread the word, and be loud. Be loud.
Exercise your right. By the way, quickly, at their last task force meeting, again, the citizen task force for Plum Creek brings the Hilton and brings people in to create the impression that this whole thing is coming from the community, is basically why they set that up. Their Todd Powell, guy someone mentioned earlier, who, the regional whatever, now lives in James, started by kind of bemoaning the fact that there are a lot of rumors out there that aren't true, these extreme radical rumors, and kind of implied that this group was behind them. Again, we have a standing invitation to them to correct us on any factual misstatement in any of our materials. It's all very public. Anyone can go to our website. We will happily change it. And I want to rebut a couple of them very quickly, just in case it appears to be their new tack is to get the most extreme rumors that they're hearing out there. I haven't heard most of these rumors. I don't know where they're hearing them, but
They write them.
someone created the rumors, and they're now basically trying to portray our group as the ones who are saying these crazy things. So let me just quickly make a few statements. To my knowledge, there is no potential for fracking on their land. Fracking. If it was, and it was profitable, I'm sure they'd do it, but I just don't think there's anything there. So we are not saying that. We are not saying that they're going to build 15 Oak Smalls, which they're now claiming that we're saying. You know, I used when I was trying to get a handle on, you know, what's 15 million square feet? I mean, that's just a number. It doesn't mean anything. You know, I asked our staff, you know, well, what's the Oak Small? It's 1 million square feet. So the statement we've been using in our materials is 15 million square feet, the equivalent size of 15 Oak Smalls. So we're not claiming they're going to build malls out here. This is something they're making up. What are some of the other ones? Some of those, I remember some of the more extreme things that they said.
Mike, I've heard golf courses and flying community.
Phosphate mining.
Who knows? Who knows?
Is it phosphate mining?
I don't know.
I've heard that.
Phosphate is
I heard that
commercially
at
valuable there or not.
126, that's why they want it all up there, because there's phosphate up there and they're gonna.
Right.
I heard about genetically modified development.
Yeah. Oh, the other big one they're saying is that they are apparently trying to rebut our statement that it's going to be the CEO and the corporate management who make the decisions, which we think is indisputable. But they're now telling their task force, reassuring them that no, you are all driving this process. Even they don't take votes. They don't do anything that creates an output. They're just kind of there to kind of be herded along to create an impression of consensus. And all I can say in response to that is, you know, read what the CEO of the company has to say. He doesn't say, we're going to wait and see what the task force in Alachua County thinks we should do with our land, and then that's what we'll do. No, they're telling their shareholders what their plan is. So they're now claiming that as well, that we are falsely proclaiming that the task force is not in charge. So those are some of the things they're saying, and if any of them come to me again before this is over, I'll mention them. But everything that we say is consistent with what is on our website. We put the information there available for everyone, and then those are our talking points. We just want to make sure people understand what the alternatives are.
I have a quote from their meeting the other night. In response to a concern that Plum Creek decision makers are removed from the area, Jim Kilberg, Atlanta-based Senior Vice President of Real Estate, Energy, and Natural Resources, emphasized the role of the local advisory council. This is not a Seattle decision, he said, motioning to a U-shaped conference room where more than 20 members sat. Everyone who is making the final decision is right here. So they swear that that's true, despite what their
The
CEO
final
says.
decision on what is the question? They are producing a document called the Envision Alachua Sector Plan document, which they are not creating. Again, they do not take votes. It's curious that of these 20 people, not a single one seems to have reservations about this. No skepticism, no critical questions. There's no disagreement where they take votes or have debates or discussions. It's controlled very much by Plum Creek.
Everybody skeptical left the group.
Well, that's true. One out here.
Mike, if the decision is 3-2 to not approve, it never gets submitted to the state, correct?
No. Oh, well, you're correct. It could be stopped before we even submit it to the state. That usually doesn't happen. Usually the local government wants to know what the state has to say about it before we make a final decision.
But you could vote it down before.
We could vote it down at the transmittal stage before it ever goes to the county, up to the state.
When do you anticipate the county holding those public meetings? It was announced this week that the county's gonna hold 4 or 5 meetings about the
Oh, yeah,
issue.
thanks, I forgot that, Julie. The county commission decided the other day that after staff has finished their review and has their recommendation, before it goes to the first planning commission meeting, we're gonna have some community workshops, we're being called, where it's just gonna be staff presenting what has been proposed along with their recommendation directly to the public. The commissioners won't be involved, where the public can ask questions, just like we're doing right now. There's going to be 2 of them in the county administration building. We don't have the dates yet. This is coming probably into the year. And actually before that, this will probably be in late fall. 2 of them in the county administration building, 1 in East Gainesville and 1 in Hawthorne. So if you want to go to those and get a straight presentation from staff, Plum Creek will not be making presentations, I will not be making presentations, and ask questions directly to staff, you can do that at those meetings. I just remember one of the other rumors that is being attributed to us is that we're telling people that this is all going to be bulldozed and turned into Section 8 housing. That's what one of the task force representatives actually said. I don't know where that came from, but it's not coming from us.
What is the chamber?
Get this one right here. Next question.
Yeah, Mike, so how much can Plum Creek affect the commission election by either a political action committee, if there any to that, or the recommendations of candidates? I mean, I'm sure they're a huge local company with a lot of financial resources. How much can they influence, either on the Republican side or the Democratic side, by donating to candidates, election campaigns, and then, affecting the outcome of the election?
They are a corporation, which we all know now is a person, according to the law of the land, and they have all the rights of a corporation. They can make contributions. They're already doing things like, for instance, they send out press releases, and they recently sent out a press release glowingly referencing one of the candidates who is in support of them and mentioning their candidacy, and very silent on everyone else. So they're doing things like this, but I think just from a purely political perspective, I think they're aware it might not be best for them to too overtly try to influence the political process. That would backfire in a place like Alachua County. So I think they're going to be careful.
Don't the election limits $400? Is that the limit they could donate?
I don't know what the current law is, to be honest with you. In Alachua County, you can't contribute more than $250.
But they could contribute through a political action committee that could influence the vote.
Yes, and they could also, yes.
These meetings that you're continuing on having, are you looking at the Chamber of Commerce in the business sector, invite them to these meetings so that they can understand what this project's going to do to their businesses? And
everyone is invited. We hope.
Can you not? Are you going to encourage them a little extra to say, hey, come on, guys, don't be sitting on the sidelines?
Well, in the Chamber of Commerce they're involved in this now, but I think they know that they have a divided membership. They can't speak for everyone, but they are doing things, and I think asking to meet with candidates privately when there's something like that going on.
The head of the chamber is on the task force. The head of Plum Creek is the treasurer for the chamber.
And Plum Creek's, one of their 2 big offices in Gainesville is in the chamber building. They run about half the state of the chamber building.
Great event Friday night, 5:30 to 7, talking about, Scott reminded me, the water improvements and the ecosystem improvements right there at Waldo Road and 441. I think it's where we're starting to fill in. And everyone's invited. If you want to know more about it, go to the website usgbcheartofflorida.org. And then, are you going to do another one of these on the water impacts?
I'm doing, anyone who asks me to come, I'm speaking. I did one in Melrose, I went to the Hawthorne one. I'm giving another meeting in a private home in Gainesville that is going to focus more on the environmental aspects of it. Again, there are some people in the environmental community who honestly believe maybe this is not such a bad thing, maybe we ought to do it. Maybe we ought to take this deal now, or otherwise something worse could happen in the future. I think it's easy to rebut that. You can get around the table and just vote and talk to them. But I'm going to be giving a presentation, I don't remember the date or time.
17th.
17th.
Sorry, I said that.
And this is on our website, so if you want to attend any of these other events, you can come to them. And again, that one, I'm going to really try to not so much talk about the economic aspects and everything, but the environmental parts of it for the environmental. Any other questions? Ma'am?
Is there a history of the Alachua County Commission making adjustments to the comp plan at the request of the developer?
Yes. The comp plan is not carved in stone. It is intended to be a document which can be amended and changed through time. The question is really the degree of change, whether or not it's consistent with the overarching principles of the plan. There are a few fundamental principles within the comprehensive plan that if you reject them, then you just might as well get rid of the plan because you don't believe in planning. And some places are like that. They don't have any planning at all. And one of them is designating where growth and development ought to happen. That's the real big one. According to the comp plan, this is not the place for growth, not intense growth. Okay, the place is out west and will be for at least the next 50 years. You know, as we grow and urbanize, you know, who knows where we'll be 50 years from now. But that's the biggie. So what they're proposing is a fundamental change. They are basically rejecting the idea of controlled or managed growth, in my opinion, because they're throwing out the so-called urban cluster concept, which basically defines an area where you want intensive development. And this is way outside. Starting a new city, basically. Starting a new city. Any other questions?
Oh, I just have one comment to make. Rose, Fagler, I think that's right.
Yes.
She is the community outreach person for Plum Creek. She's the one that I communicated with to try to get her to come and share the platform today with Mike. She's now intending, I'm guessing, to go directly to our town commission and ask for time for a second meeting here. So she can just be the only one making the presentation. I'm going to give her the information, ask her to contact our town manager, and then it'll be up to her to arrange the meeting. But should there be a meeting, and it'll be on the town calendar, I would encourage you to pack the room.
Yes, you're all welcome to come.
Pack the room
Plum
and
Creek's
hear what
presentation.
she has to say. It's an extremely interesting presentation, and they bring really good food.
And it's state of the art from a public relations campaign. It's state of the art. Again, the best way to do this would be for us both to be up here speaking, to keep each other honest. They don't want to do that.
No, she would.
What Harvey said made me think about this, about turning Alachua County residents against each other. I grew up in East Gainesville, and I'm really concerned about how they've targeted the black community, and that they have bought into this big pipe dream of all the jobs that are gonna come, and I think that's gonna be a big voting block's gonna be brought out for the primary in the black community by the new president of the Democratic Party in Alachua County, and by a lot of churches. And so I'm really concerned about that, and I'd like some ideas about how we can help our friends in the black community realize that that's not all it's come out to be, this whole plan.
I think, you know, that community is not as monolithic as some people think. Everyone's capable of making up their own minds. And I think a lot of people in the African community in East Gainesville know this is nonsense. They know it's 15 miles away. They've heard those kind of promises before. And they know they're being used. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of enthusiastic turnout to vote for. But things like this. But you know, we had a meeting in Hawthorne where it was made clear to them their whole town's not for this. What we're counting on is the thousands of people who live in this area who may not usually participate. Most people don't vote in primaries. Okay, they're the ones who are gonna be concerned enough about this, because they're the ones being directly affected. It's in their backyard. And we think, we're working hard on turning out all of these people, making sure they're aware, we're focusing on this. So I think our boost from that reality is going to overwhelm anything that Plum Creek may be able to do in the aftermath.
If someone tells you, we're with Plum Creek because they're gonna bring jobs, tell them to go ask their favorite Plum Creek employee, what jobs? Exactly who is gonna provide the jobs, because that's where the whole thing falls apart. If you ask the Plum Creek people what jobs, they cannot answer that, they will always change the conversation. So if that comes up, that is the question that you need to direct people to. Who is going to provide the jobs? There's no answer to that.
Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, send it out, make sure they understand August 26th is when this thing is going to be decided. It's the most important thing you can do, everyone who lives around you. Any other questions? Thank you for
Election's
coming
here,
tonight.
downstairs.
Appreciate your time. Come look at these maps, I'll look them up if you want to go.